People are always talking about how the Dow Jones is up or down for the day, but what even is the Dow Jones, and how does it relate to the economy? Well, first, it helps to understand the history of the Dow Jones. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average, or Dow for short, was originally started in 1885 by Edward Jones, no relation to the company by the way, and Charles Dow, hence the name Dow Jones. And originally it was taking 12 stocks and averaging it, so just summing those 12 stocks and dividing it by 12. Now, these 12 stocks typically came from companies that were very large and were typically industry leaders in their respective industries. And back in 1885, these 12 main companies were typically industrial in nature, so usually they range from things like gas and coal or things like leather or sugar production. And originally, GE was the only company that was from the original 12 that was still listed today, but as of 2018, that's no longer the case. Nowadays, the Dow actually comprises of 30 stock that aren't necessarily industrial, but the name still remains the same. And some of these companies would be Amex, McDonald's, or Apple, just to name a few. And instead of dividing by 30, it's actually divided by something called the Dow divisor. And what this divisor does is it actually smooths out the effects of things like stock splits or mergers or acquisitions. Now, I'm actually going to go into detail how the divisor actually works because I think it's important to understand. Now, for example, if the Dow was just made out of two companies, each at $100, then the Dow would actually be 100. But say that one company splits its stock from 1 to 2. So now instead of one $100 share, you have two $50 shares. Well, now the Dow would actually show a value of 75, which doesn't give an accurate picture. So instead of using the number of companies, the divisor is used. So as you can see, if the divisor is 1.5, then it actually smooths out the effect, and in both cases, before and after the stock split, the Dow would show a value of $100. The divisor right now is actually a value less than 1, which means that the Dow actually is a value higher than the sum of all the stocks of the 30 stocks that it comprises. So with any metric, there are pros and cons to using it, and the Dow is no exception. The Dow is what's known as price weighted, which means that higher price stocks actually have a greater influence than, let's say, a lower price stock. So for example, right now, Apple actually has more influence than, let's say, Walmart or Boeing, because Apple is a higher price stock than Walmart or Boeing. So you could see how this could kind of create problems because Apple may not necessarily be representative of the overall economy or even the overall market because it's, specific to one industry, the tech industry, whereas Walmart and Boeing may be able to give a bigger picture. So there are pros and cons to using it. Another issue is that the Dow only comprises of 30 stock when there are thousands of publicly traded companies out there, so it kind of gives a skewed view. The S&P 500 would actually be a different option, which I'll do a video comparing the S&P versus the Dow in a separate video. However, it is widely quoted and is often used as a benchmark, so it is worth paying attention to. Now, as to whether the Dow correlates with the economy or even GDP, the reality is there are tons of indicators out there as far as the health of the economy, and GDP is just one of them, and it just measures the monetary value of final goods and services. Now, at times, GDP and the Dow do correlate, but not always. And because people believe that GDP correlates with the overall health of the economy, which there's a case to be made that it's not, but let's just say for the sake of argument that it is, then because the Dow and GDP correlate, then the Dow would therefore be a good indicator of the economy. And because the Dow actually prices in anticipated changes and is actually known as a forward or leading indicator, then you can actually make the argument that Dow is actually a better indicator of where the economy is going, whereas GDP is more of a lagging indicator and just shows where the economy was. So no matter which way you look at it, the Dow actually wouldn't be a good indicator for how the overall health of the economy is right now. And then on top of that, you have the Federal Reserve having ways to strongly influence where the market is headed. And combine that with the fact that we're in unprecedented times, and so that's going to yield unprecedented results. Even if the Dow was a good indicator of the overall health of the economy, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to play out that well right now. And on top of all this, the times that the Dow doesn't correlate with GDP, we have extreme differences. So banking on that correlation could yield disastrous results. And so why is it used sometimes to kind of gauge the overall health of the economy? Well, personally, I believe that reason is twofold. One, I think it's just one of those indicators that's been used year after year, and after enough time, it's just kind of really hard to change people's mindset and change them to a different metric. And secondly, I think people use different indicators to kind of further their point. For example, if I'm a financial advisor and I'm trying to show you how well I did compared to the market, let's say in the past 30 days I beat the S&P 500 by 5% and I beat the Dow by 3%, I'm probably going to use the S&P 500 as my benchmark because it makes me look better. Now, I do think there is value in paying attention to the Dow, especially because it's just an indicator that everybody uses. But in general, I think it's helpful to understand how it's calculated as well as the history behind it, and hopefully that makes you use better informed decisions. So that's it for this video. If you found this video interesting or if you learned something new, please hit that like button. I'd appreciate it a lot. And if you like financial topic videos, I do one every Wednesday as well as sometimes on Saturday. And if you like economic updates or financial news videos, I do one of those every Monday as well as Friday. So please hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more.